Hello and welcome. I'm Gauhar Raza and you are watching Eureka.
Eminent Indian mathematician Professor Mudumbai Seshadri Narasimhan is credited with exceptional contributions to global studies in both algebraic and differential geometry. His Narasimhan Seshadri theorem with another renowned mathematician C S Seshadri has made a big mark. Professor Narasimhan's passion for mathematics won him several awards in the field, the most noted being the Padma Bhushan in 1990. He has striven to promote research in mathematics. Professor Narasimhan hails from a village in Tamil Nadu and has an agriculturalist background. He graduated in mathematics from Loyola College, Madras and did his PhD from Bombay University. Professor Narasimhan credits TIFR for shaping him into the distinguished mathematician that he is.
We have the most eminent mathematician in the country with us. Welcome, Professor Narasimhan.
Thank you very much.
I'm really thankful that you decided to come and give us time. Let's go back to your childhood. As a child, you were very keen on doing mathematics. When did you start your interest in mathematics? Do you remember, or it was something that was ingrained right from the beginning?
I think roughly it's around when I was about 12 or 13. While I had some idea of mathematics in school, mostly, and even more surprisingly, I was studying in a town which is about 5 miles from my place, and that town had a small library called Panchayat Union Library.
Okay.
And surprisingly, they allowed me to borrow books from there. So there were general books, but for some reason there were one or two advanced textbooks in mathematics. So I borrowed them, so I could read something more than what I had learnt in the school. And that is at that time I felt.
How did you get interested? Because you come from an agrarian background.
Yes.
Your parents were primarily not into education but into agriculture. So how did you get attracted towards mathematics?
Yeah. Well, what I can say is this. I think in school, if you see most of things, you are taught something, your exam is to reproduce what you're taught. You don't question anymore. Even physics used to be taught like that, unfortunately, those days.
Even now it's taught like that.
In mathematics, on the other hand, you had to solve some problems, so-called riders, sometimes difficult. So you have to think for yourself. It's not enough, you cannot just reproduce. Of course, you will get 40% of the mark if you reproduce, but the rest you have to think for your own. And that's what I think
Excited
excited me. I think so.
It was because you had to tax your brain at least while doing mathematics.
Yes, and that's what Euclidean geometry used to do. Sometimes it's not obvious, but if you drop a perpendicular, things become obvious.
And as a child, you were spoiling walls of the house.
Yes.
And parents got worried and bought you a blackboard.
And that way they probably also gave me some place to work, but also saw to it the walls were not defaced.
But you had to travel about 5 kilometers every day to go to school in a bullock cart.
Yes,
right. Were you thinking of mathematical problems and training your mind even at that time?
I wouldn't think so. I don't remember what one has to be worried about. No, you were driving the cart yourself, some of the students, so you have to pay attention to that. So probably not.
And your parents always encouraged to do whatever you wanted to do.
And my father passed away when I was about 12. I was the eldest son. And we were fairly well off once. But then droughts and my father passing away, there are reduced circumstances. But I must say, in spite of it, the family members said, if you want to do means they don't know what it means. you pursue your interest in mathematics.
What
That was
was
amazing.
how do you remember your mother encouraging you?
No, she said, yes, do what you want.
How do you remember Loyola College?
Yeah,
Very
that,
famous even now.
Yes.
It's one of the best, in fact.
So I wanted to study mathematics. At that time, there were two colleges which were supposed to be good in mathematics. One was Loyola. So I joined Loyola College. I didn't know why it was supposed to be good in mathematics, but I found it out later. And the person in charge of mathematics in Loyola College was...
So it was your decision that you went to Loyola College.
Yes, yes. Father Racine was a Frenchman who was belonged to the Society of Jesus. You know, Loyola College is run by them. And he was the graduate student or a PhD student of very great French mathematician called Eureka. And he introduced many modern subjects in India. For the first time, algebra and so on. And also, teaching was done, also emphasizing on concepts rather than only on computation. You know, usually mathematics is supposed to be computation. Right. And he used to somehow, if they found that some student is good, he used to try to interact with them directly, talk to them, and so on and so forth. And so the whole, I got an idea of, not completely, there's something more than the mathematics that you do in your, college. And somehow he instilled in us, some of the people who are interested in mathematics, a good taste for mathematics. You may wonder, what is taste? It is to discriminate what is important, what is not, what is trivial and what is...
and this training helped you throughout your
yes,
career.
That is the first starting point of my way of thinking mathematics. I will probably mention 2 or 3 others later. This is the one. And also more important, it's she who told me to apply to Tata Institute. Who would have known about Tata Institute those days? It's 1953
Yeah, a
or
child
something.
coming from
Yes.
a small village
Yes,
of Tamil Nadu won't know about Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. And at that time, it was very new.
It was very new.
It was very, very new institution being built.
And he was in touch with the mathematicians there, young people, and that's why, so that was a real break. There's no doubt. I remember I asked Racine, he introduced me, he said I should go to Tata Institute. I said, yeah, I'll go and try. I want to do mathematics. Suppose I'm not selected, what do I do? He said, well, give up mathematics, he says.
That's what he said. If you don't get Tata Institute of Fundamental
because
Research,
if you want to
then
do,
just don't do mathematics.
But, you wouldn't say that today because there's opportunities of going abroad. But especially from a guy coming from a small village, going abroad or even to have even little money and so on is a difficult thing. Think of it.
I have to take a break. Don't go anywhere. We'll come back soon. Welcome back. Professor Narasimhan, the other turning point in your life was coming to TIFR.
Yes.
And luckily you got it. Otherwise, we would have lost a mathematician, a first-rate mathematician. Here you started working as a researcher.
Yeah.
So what was the problem that you thought initially that you would like to crack?
No, I didn't have any problem in mind. And in fact, one of the good things in Tata Institute is you should learn somewhat broad-based mathematics before you enter the subject. See, what used to happen in India before, in many places, there were very good mathematicians, but mostly they will just look at some paper, write something more on that, and so on and so forth, and they will not know anything more than a very narrow field. But one of the first things that TIFR did, which is quite common in many Western countries, which is never in India. There was no graduate school before. That is, if you enter in the other countries, you go through 2 or 3 years of training in high-level subject, mathematics or physics, where you are taught by first-rate people. And then you go into the field, so that you get a general idea, which is important. Otherwise, you
You do
just do
mediocre work
thing
throughout
and so on.
your life.
It's a mediocre life. So the first thing was, so I had no particular problem in mind. I wanted to do good mathematics. No particular problem in mind, no. So that's how it was. But there what happened was, okay, I must say about Professor K. Chandrasekharan, who was a young man, 30s, whom Baba was invited to do something in mathematics.
Tata Institute of Fundamental
Research.
And started this group around him.
Around him. And he was associated with great mathematicians outside.
By the way, Baba always had this very strong notion that it's individuals around which the group should be built.
Yes.
Instead of building the institution first,
Yes.
he always identified
the right
person.
persons. And of course, he consulted I'm sure he consulted Hermann Weyl and for Neumann before he wanted whomever he wanted. So he always, at the highest level, he operated. So he has started a very well-planned, well-thought-out program how to train people. And also made it possible for young people to come into contact directly with first-rate mathematicians from the world, who will come and lecture for 2 years, 2 months, 3 months.
So this was the period that Tata Institute of Fundamental Research was thriving with the activities, and a lot of interaction was happening where the first rate mind was coming there to ignite the young
people. The young people were just raw but enthusiastic and dying to learn something, and and also some of the very good people came there, like the young people. So these people also, you remember, at that time, it was not a well-known place. It was Tata Institute or mathematics, there was not much. Why would first-rate people want to come and teach? I think it's two things. One, I think Chandrasekharan's personal sort of contact with them. And also, I think there was some idealism in some of them, that they should come and do something here for 2-3 months. Anyway, that made
Was it related somehow to freedom movement also?
Oh yes, I wanted to say that. And I must also say, thanks to the politicians like Nehru, who understood the importance of mathematics as an intellectual activity as well as for the economic development, they made important financial input into science. So you may say, okay, we have independence, everything, unless actually it is done. And this was used very much.
And it was at the time when India was a very poor country.
Poor country.
Dilapidated,
Yes.
ransacked by the imperialism,
Yes.
completely drained out of its riches. And at that time, people like Nehru realized the importance of mathematics. Did he talk about mathematics?
Yes, he has. I will probably send you some of it. He has written, of course, he has already written his book on
Discovery of India.
But he has also sent some messages to conferences. And amazing how much he had an idea of what mathematics is about. Not that he understood mathematics or something. So, just as you said, one of the quotations from Nehru, it's more or less what you said, I think, to some extent, that mathematics is the vehicle of exact scientific thought.
Right.
It enables us to understand nature to some extent. He says to some extent. And so on.
He was very precise.
Very precise.
Almost like a scientist.
Right, like a scientist.
He didn't give all the credit to mathematics, he said to some extent.
So, so in any case, it was very important that there was also financial support for. In a certain way.
Would you say that gone are the days when such intellectuals came to politics?
Well, I suppose there are not many countries where there have been such intellectuals, let alone ourselves. Of course. This is something very special, to understand, a deep understanding of, if at all, if scientists, if politicians want science, it is directly for some economic benefit. I don't blame them. Of course, that's what it should be. But there is a man who also understood the importance of this as an intellectual activity. That's
Without which probably translational research cannot be done.
Yes.
You need to understand the nature. I have to take a break, but don't go anywhere. We'll come back soon. Welcome back. Professor Narasimhan, we were discussing how the political leadership and scientific leadership aligned itself to create a new India.
Yes.
You did mathematics, and mathematics doesn't probably require so much of spending and money, other than interaction with other mathematicians across the world,
Yes.
without which mathematics cannot flourish in any part of the world. Uh, when you were working, the two theorems that you are credited with, uh, how much was the contribution of your students, the group around you, and what is so special about, especially Narasimhan Seshadri equation?
No, I think it is, I mean, first, as far as the actual work is concerned, it's only two of us. There is no more group or something like that. But however, what has gone behind, indirectly in this work, was the atmosphere in Tata Institute. That you should really have a very broad-based training. See, our result is something which connects to unexpected things. So unless you are aware of the many aspects, you cannot even think of there's a combination. And the point was, there were a number of first-aid people who came and talked about very advanced things, which in our enthusiasm, we somehow absorbed these things. And there's one more thing. It's very important to keep in touch with what's happening in the world. But it's also important to somewhat draw back a bit and think for yourself, not to be too much influenced by very big people.
Why did you align yourself or went to France, not to Cambridge?
Okay.
Which would be a natural thing to go,
Sure,
because we belong to
That's right.
British imperialism.
I think that credit goes to Chandrasekharan. Now, he himself, as you rightly say, was trained in the usual earlier Indian tradition of close association with Cambridge and so on. But however, I think when he was in the US, he came into contact with different group of people. And after the Second World War, there was no doubt Paris was the center of mathematics. In the sense, all the important new ideas, new techniques were all coming from France. And as even the other people said, France is our teacher. Even USA and Cambridge at that time said, now I don't know what they'll say. So somehow he had the idea that we should have contact with them. So he invited those people. How he convinced them to come here is an amazing thing for me. And great people whose names you just hear, and then they lecture, you take down their notes, and then if you have an opportunity to go and talk to these great people next day to see what you have written is correct, and then you go on developing contact with them. I mean, this is something amazing. That's how I think Tata Institute in the early days owes a lot to the French coming there and so on.
French mathematicians.
French mathematicians. Schwartz, one of the persons who came, who was one of my important mentors, he somehow saw that something is happening, and he is supposed to have told his colleagues, the students here are salts of the earth. I'm quoting him, I'm not making it up. So we should help them. So they somehow arranged with a lot of difficulties to get 2 or 3 of us, for example, me, C S Seshadri, and one more, to go there. And that's also the time, really, as I said, mathematics was just flourishing in France. So that was very important.
That unleashed your
Yes.
and Professor Seshadri's creative energies,
Yes.
and you excelled in that. I wanted to ask you another question, which a lot of people would be interested in fact, that India has done great mathematics in past, and there has been a very confusing debate about Vedic mathematics and modern mathematics and all that. What are your views on that?
There's no doubt we have, apart from zero and so on, I mean, well known, big contribution. Now, this Vedic mathematics is nothing to do with Vedic or something. It is somebody's who knew some mathematics, wrote a textbook and called it Vedic, and it has become now more a question of a commercial thing.
You have got all the awards that a mathematician could think of,
Yes.
right from Bhatnagar Award to most of the international awards. Which one is closest to your heart?
See, it's very hard to say. I mean, naturally, the first thing that you get in India is something very important, like Bhatnagar, because you feel you are recognized. It's not that, okay. Now, the other awards, this King Faisal Award, I think that's important not because of this, but probably you should look at the names of all the other people who got it. It's all some of the greatest mathematicians.
Yes.
So that as people say, I feel humbled to be part of that group.
How do you look at future of mathematics in the country?
I think, okay, let me be frank. I think it's very good, but our real problem is what we call brain drain. If you see, for example, when we were all young, my generation, the best Indian mathematicians, except one or two, were all in India. Now that's no longer the case. Everybody, every young person wants to go abroad. Even when there are good facilities, they want to use the facilities at the undergraduate level to get a good training and then immediately go abroad. I have nothing against people going abroad. Everybody has to go to the best place where they can...
That opens your mind.
Opens mind, acquire knowledge, techniques and everything.
Right.
But for God's sake, come back sometime.
What about your views on spending on science in the country?
Spending on science, let me be clear with this. I think it has to be increased very much. Now, on the other hand, let me also say, if you want to do in certain institutions, there were sufficient funds and usually distributed well and so on, without too much of, controls. But then this is in a very small number of places. What we should do is, we should increase the funding and create conditions like that in many more places.
Would you like to sign off by giving a message to the younger generation?
If you have talent for mathematics, don't waste it. By which I mean, don't dissipate it doing something else which doesn't really do justice to your capacities. Though you may feel, okay, you may be better off. So then take and go into some research problems or whatever to try to do research. And let me also tell you, you means the young people, you can have a good life and good standard of living if you are a mathematician. Don't let people think. And also you can do what you want. In some sense, you can be intellectually, you can be very satisfied. Try to first learn the basic language of modern mathematics. And then read really great classics and textbooks. And then, as I said earlier, go anywhere in the world to get all the knowledge and techniques. And then try to somehow come back
and contribute
to the country. Approach the problem from as sophisticated or as high point of view you are capable of. In other words, look from the top. And then try to...
And you are talking about intellectual.
I mean, you should somehow try to learn to discard the useless information and keep what is the core. Then only you can attack.
Doing mathematics could be intellectually very satisfying. And you spend a good life being a mathematics. Crack the problem, look at it from the top. And that is intellectual top. We'll be back next week with another as fascinating scientist as Professor Narasimhan is. Professor Narasimhan, can I, on your behalf, promise our viewers that you will be happy to answer questions if they have?
Yes, certainly.
Work hard, ask questions, write to us. Our email address is eureka@rstv@gmail.com. Goodbye. Till next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you
it was really an honor to talk to you.
Pleasure.